Dad, get out of the car. Please, Dad, listen to me. Ryan's voice exploded in my ear like thunder in the middle of the day. I was holding the phone tight, breathing hard. Through the window, the dusty road stretched out between empty fields, the dust swirling in the wind. Thomas, my oldest son, was driving with a calmness that chilled me to the bone. His eyes were fixed on the road, his hands steady on the wheel. There was something sinister about his serenity. Dad, you have to listen to me. Thomas set it all up. He wants to take you to a home, out in Phoenix. He already signed the papers, used your name to transfer money. Don't trust him, Dad. Get out of there. Get out of there right now. Ryan yelled before the line suddenly went dead. All that was left was the whistle of the wind seeping through the window and the pounding of my heart. I turned to look at him. Thomas was still quiet, with a faint smile playing on his lips. The smile of someone who knows they've already won. He didn't ask any questions, didn't even look at me. He just gave off that unbearable coldness that settles between a father and son when there's no love left. Only distance. In that instant, I understood that this trip wasn't about sharing memories, like he'd said. It was about closing the book on my story, the story of a quiet old man. My story. 2 days earlier, I still believed life was giving me back a little bit of kindness. Thomas had shown up unexpectedly with a pie from the old bakery where Lucy, my wife, used to buy her favorite sweets. He told me he wanted to take me for a drive, to get some fresh air. Like when you used to take me out to the fields to see the harvest. His words warmed my heart. Since she died, the house was filled with nothing but the ticking of the clock and the smell of cold coffee. I had nothing left but memories and my 2 sons. Ryan was always busy, and it had been years since Thomas had called me Dad, without that edge of distance in his voice. That morning, when he came to pick me up, I carefully folded a few changes of clothes, my pills, and an old photo of Lucy. He opened the car door for me with that same faint smile he always wore. On the way, he talked about his work, about clients, about numbers, things that had little to do with the simple life of an old farmer. I listened, nodded, hoping that later, maybe by the creek, we could talk like a real father and son. But then that call came, and with it, all my hope crumbled. I gripped the phone, shaking. Outside, the road plunged deeper between the hills, with no signs or houses in sight. I swallowed hard and tried to sound calm. Son, what's the name of this place we're going to? I think I forgot. Thomas shot me a quick glance and answered, Don't worry about it, Dad. I'm taking care of everything. You just need to rest. I nodded, hiding the fear that was growing inside me. The midday sun streamed through the glass, lighting up my hands, these hands that had tilled the earth my whole life to raise them. I watched them tremble, calloused and rough, and yet I felt a deep chill that went straight to my soul. Lucy used to say, when someone's silence scares you, it's because they're hiding a secret. And in that moment, her voice echoed in my head like a prophecy. I realized then that I was sitting in a car taking me to a place I might never come back from. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments below. 2 days before the trip, the morning in our small Nebraska town was as quiet as ever. I made coffee and opened the old photo album, the one with pictures that had already yellowed with age. Lucy was smiling, radiant, in the middle of a field, hugging a bundle of wheat taller than her. Next to her, Thomas, barely 10 years old, had his pants covered in mud, but his eyes were shining with happiness. Ryan was laughing his head off with a kite in his hand. I stared at it for a long time, remembering the smell of sunshine in her hair, my wife's voice calling that supper was ready. The house was empty now. Only the tick-tock of the clock marked the slow march of time. When the doorbell rang, I thought I'd imagined it. Since Lucy died, Thomas rarely came by without calling first. He walked in wearing a crisp white shirt, carrying a paper bag from the bakery where his mother had loved the pies. "I brought you some cinnamon rolls," he said. "Mom loved these, remember?" His voice sounded soft but distant. I didn't know what to say. I just offered him a seat and poured some coffee. He smiled. He said the aroma was still the same as before, and he started talking about his work, about friends, about projects. For the first time in a long time, the house was filled with laughter again, even if it was a little forced. In the middle of our chat, Thomas looked around, and his gaze landed on the portrait of his mother. "Dad, I think it's time we were closer." I looked up. My heart was pounding. "What do you mean?" "I want us to take a trip," he answered. "Just for a few days, out to Arizona. I booked a little inn near Sedona. No noise, no phones, just you and me. What do you say?" I was speechless. It had been so long since I'd heard those 3 words together. You and me. So simple, but so warm they lit a spark in my chest. "Son, what a surprise. I thought you were so busy." "There's always time for family if you really want to make it," he said firmly. I smiled, feeling like I was being reborn. So many years of distance, so many unanswered calls suddenly seemed to dissolve. I thought maybe he had changed, that his mother's death had made him understand what really mattered. I couldn't sleep that night. I took out Lucy's old notebook, where she wrote down recipes and notes for me. On the last page, in her delicate handwriting, she had left a sentence: "Never close your heart to your children, because one day they will want to come back." I read it over and over, smiling. Maybe she was right. The next morning, when Thomas called to confirm the departure time, I was already ready. I packed a few changes of clothes, my pills, and Lucy's photo in my duffel bag. When his car pulled up to the curb, my heart was pounding with the excitement of someone getting ready for a long-awaited journey. "Ready, Dad?" "I'm always ready to go with you," I answered. The car pulled away, the tires crunching on the gravel road. I watched out the window as the roof of my small house got smaller and smaller, and a warmth spread through my soul. My whole life I had dreamed of a day like this, father and son, together on the same road, with no grudges, no distance. I never imagined that at that very moment, this road wasn't taking me to a reunion, but straight into a storm that was already waiting for me, silent, on the horizon. The highway heading out of Nebraska stretched on forever, flanked by harvested cornfields, nothing left but the dry stalks, scorched by the sun. Thomas turned on the radio. A soft saxophone melody mixed with the whistle of the wind seeping through the crack in the window. I stayed quiet, looking at the horizon, with a strange feeling of calm mixed with distance. It had been a long time since we'd traveled together, since Lucy's death. I wanted to believe this trip was a new beginning, but something inside me couldn't quite trust it. Around noon, Thomas stopped the car at a small diner on the side of the road, with pale yellow walls and dust-covered windows. "Let's rest a bit, Dad," he said. I nodded and got out of the car, stretching my legs. The air smelled like roasted coffee and motor oil. Inside, there were only 2 or 3 customers. Thomas picked a booth by the window. He ordered a black coffee for me and a latte for himself. I smiled and said, "Remember when you were a kid? Every time you saw me with coffee, you insisted on trying it and then said it tasted awful." Thomas smiled faintly. "I can handle it now, Dad. I guess life is something you learn to take bitter." The phrase froze me for a second, but he immediately changed the subject. He started talking about his company, about clients, about people who don't get it. I barely understood what he was saying, but I nodded, just to keep the moment going. When the waitress brought the check, Thomas opened his briefcase and pulled out a sheaf of papers. He took one and placed it on the table next to a pen. "Oh, by the way, Dad, can you sign this for me? It's just a confirmation sheet for the reservation, so we can get the senior discount." I picked up the paper. The letters were small, cramped. At the top there was an unfamiliar logo. Saguaro Vistas. I frowned. What's the name of the place we're staying, son? That's it. They just changed the name. Sign it quick. That way I can send it in right now, he answered in a casual voice. He sounded calm, but his hand was shaking just slightly. I put on my glasses and read more carefully. At the bottom there was a tiny line. Medical care authorization and temporary administration of assets. I looked up. What's this about medical care? I'm not sick. Thomas smiled with a light tone that didn't quite hide his discomfort. Oh, Dad, don't worry about it. It's just a formality. All these places ask for it. I already took care of everything. He pushed the pen toward me. His gaze was firm, but he wouldn't quite meet my eyes. A strange feeling crept over me, like when you stick your hand in damp earth and feel something move underneath. I placed the pen on the paper, pretending I was going to sign, but I stopped halfway. Let's just take care of this when we get back, okay? I don't like signing things without reading them properly. Thomas was silent for a few seconds and then let out a forced smile. Whatever you want. No rush. While he got up to pay, I glanced at the document again. In one corner, a blurry stamp said, Phoenix Meadows Care Center. I felt my chest tighten. I carefully folded the paper and put it in my shirt pocket. Back in the car, Thomas turned up the volume on the music, maybe to cover the silence. I stared out the window. The trees passed by, one after another, like memories fading into the distance. Lucy's voice echoed in my head. When someone makes you feel too much silence, it's because they're hiding something. I turned to look at Thomas. His lips were pressed together, concentrating on the wheel. The sunlight reflected off his face, a face so unfamiliar that a shiver ran down my spine. And then a thought cut through me, sharp and quick as a razor. Maybe my son wasn't taking me on a trip. Maybe he was taking me to a place I would never leave. The afternoon was fading, golden as honey, and the road wound between fields cracked by the sun. I rested my head against the window, listening to the constant hum of the engine mixed with the restless beat of my heart. Thomas kept driving, his gaze fixed ahead, his face serene to the point of coldness. I tried to find words to break the silence, but my throat was burning. Lucy's voice echoed in my mind, soft and firm, the same one that had been with me through 40 years of marriage. When someone talks less than usual, Thomas, it's because they're thinking too much. And when they fall completely silent, it's because they've already made a decision. I sighed slowly. After all these years, I still felt her presence beside me, in every breath, in every sunset. I looked out the window. The sky was an incredible blue, and in the distance, a pair of hawks circled in the air. I had taught Thomas how to tell their calls apart when he was a kid, a curious little boy who would squeeze my hand with his tiny one. Back then he would ask me, Dad, why can birds fly and people can't? I would laugh, ruffling his hair. Because we don't have wings, son, but we have hearts, and a heart that knows how to love flies higher than any bird. Now looking at his face in the sunset, I couldn't find that heart. Maybe he had replaced it with something else, ambition, calculation, or the fear of poverty that life had sown in him. The car turned onto a narrow dirt road, kicking up a cloud of dust. Are we almost at the inn, son? I asked. Almost there, just a little further, he replied without looking at me. His voice no longer had the warmth of the morning. There was something heavy in the air, like a thick fog that pressed on my chest. I took the old photograph of Lucy out of my pocket, the one I always carry with me. It was our wedding photo. She next to me, with her serene smile and eyes full of faith. I looked at it for a long time, feeling like she was watching me from somewhere. Suddenly, her voice seemed to rise up inside me, clear as a whisper. Don't let them take you to a place you didn't choose. I shuddered and looked up. Thomas was still driving, but his eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. That glance lasted only a second, but it was colder than the wind off the plains. I tried to calm down. Maybe I was exaggerating. Maybe Ryan had gotten confused or misunderstood something. But the image of that document from the diner came back to me. Phoenix Meadows Care Center. A tremor ran through me. I placed my hand on my chest, right where I kept Lucy's photo. "Lucy," I murmured inside, "if you were here, you'd understand. I've never been afraid of my children, but today, their gaze scares me." The car kept moving, and the sunset stained everything red. That light reflected on Thomas's face like a thin line of blood. The road narrowed. The silence grew. You could only hear the constant roll of the tires. I knew we were about to arrive, but I was no longer sure if the destination was really that quiet inn he had told me about. Inside me, the unease was no longer a passing shadow. It was growing, dense and alive, like a dark seed beginning to sprout in the dusk. And I had a feeling that very soon, that seed would break the earth, bringing with it a storm I never could have imagined. The sun was already tilting toward the west when the car stopped in front of a beige-colored building. High up, a silver sign with blue letters hung. Phoenix Meadows Care Center. I slowly read each word, feeling something inside me clench. "Son, this isn't an inn," I said, my voice trembling. Thomas turned off the engine. His smile was fleeting, sharp as a steel blade. "I just want them to give you a checkup before you rest. It's no big deal. It'll be quick." I looked around. There was no trace of any inn like he had said. No water, no tourists. Just a metal fence and a gate with a guard. 2 people in white uniforms came out to greet us and said hello to Thomas as if they already knew him. We went into the lobby. The air smelled like disinfectant and new plastic. Plastic chairs were lined up along the hallway, and on the walls, photos of elderly people smiled stiffly in fake settings. A young woman behind the counter looked up. She smiled mechanically and said, "Good afternoon. Mr. Thomas Miller? It says here, diagnosis of mild dementia, is that correct? Please have the guardian sign the documents." I froze. I felt my heart stop. "What did she say? Who told her I have dementia?" I asked, raising my voice. The girl was startled and looked at Thomas. He immediately put his hand on my shoulder, smiling with a practiced awkwardness. "Calm down, Dad. They just put that down for protocol." But the receptionist's look changed. It was a mix of pity and caution. An agitated old man in a nursing home probably wasn't an unusual sight. 2 orderlies approached with measured steps. "Don't worry, sir. We'll help you calm down," one of them said. I took a step back. I was breathing hard. In my entire life, no one had ever spoken to me like that, with the condescending tone you use for a child or a madman. I looked around. The floor shone under the cold fluorescent lights. This place wasn't a refuge. It was a prison for the forgotten. "Thomas," I said, my voice broken, "why did you bring me here?" He smiled without any emotion. "You're tired. You just need to rest for a while. Everything is already arranged." "Rest here? In this place?" "It's a safe place." That word cut me like a knife. Safe. I had worked my entire life under the sun, selling every sack of corn, every bushel of wheat to give him an education. And now he was talking to me about safety in a place like this. I took a deep breath, holding back tears. "Do you remember when your mother died? I promised her I would never let my children see me weak. Today, son, you are forcing me to break that promise." Thomas looked away, pretending to check his phone, but I saw how his hand tensed. The receptionist was still waiting. The pen was ready on the papers. I read the printed line. "Permanent admission, under medical supervision." I picked up the pen. I set it on the desk and pushed it toward her. "I'm not signing. I'm not dead. I'm not crazy." No one answered. You could only hear the hum of the air conditioning and the loaded silence of all the staring. I turned toward the door, my legs shaking. Behind me? Thomas muttered. You're just making things difficult, Dad. I didn't turn around. Outside, the sky was turning red. The sunset light came through the glass, and my shadow was cast on the door. Small, trembling, but still human. Inside me, the humiliation of being treated as demented burned like a hot coal. I didn't know where I would go, but I knew one thing. I had to get out of there before my own son buried me alive, in the silence of his guilt. I walked out of the lobby, my legs trembling. Outside, the air smelled like gasoline and dust. The afternoon sun was beating down on everything. Thomas was still inside, talking in a low voice with the receptionist, probably trying to figure out how to convince me to sign those papers. I walked slowly towards the old gas station next door, where a small shop sold sodas and snacks. A man in a blue uniform was filling the tank of a truck, paying no attention to me. My heart was racing. I didn't have much time. If I stayed there, in a few minutes, Thomas would come out. He would take me by the arm and with sweet words, he would make me sign that document. And then everything that was mine, my freedom, my dignity, would disappear. I remembered those distant mornings when Lucy was still alive. Every time I went out to the field, she would tell me, "If you see a storm coming, don't just stand there, Thomas. The wind doesn't kill you. It's the fear of running that does." I took a deep breath. I gripped the straps of my duffel bag. In my mind, there was only one thought. I had to leave. Now. I walked toward the restrooms at the back of the gas station. Inside it was dark and damp, but clean. I locked the door and slid down onto the cold floor. Water dripped rhythmically from a broken pipe. Outside, I heard a car engine start. It was Thomas's. I held my breath. The noise got farther away, and farther, until all that was left was the whistle of the wind in the hallway. I lifted my head. Through the vent, a sliver of light came in, thin as a thread, lighting up my face. I was shaking, not from cold, but from fear and relief at the same time. He hadn't looked for me. He had left. The gas station attendant knocked on the door. "Sir, are you okay?" I opened it a crack. "Could I please borrow your phone?" My hands were shaking as I dialed Ryan's number. He answered on the third ring, his voice choked. "Dad. Oh my God, where are you?" I thought. "I'm at a gas station. There's a sign that says, mile marker 87, Old Highway. Can you hear me?" "Yes, of course. Don't move from there. I'm going to call a friend, Arthur. He's a retired cop and lives nearby. He'll come get you. Stay where you are and don't trust anyone else, understand?" I nodded even though I knew he couldn't see me. "Son, don't let Thomas know where I am." "I promise. Keep your phone handy. If anything happens, call me." I gave the phone back to the man and thanked him 1,000 times. He looked at me curiously. "Do you need help, sir?" "No, thank you. I'm just waiting for family." I sat down in a plastic chair in front of the little store. Every car that passed made my chest tighten, afraid it was Thomas coming back. I wondered if I would have the strength to run again if that happened. I didn't know. But I did know one thing. This fear was better than being locked up in that place he called safe. 40 minutes later, an old pickup truck stopped in front of me. A man with gray hair and a blue shirt got out. "Mr. Miller? I'm Arthur, Ryan's friend. Your son is very worried. He asked me to come right away." Hearing Ryan's name, my voice broke. Arthur opened the door and helped me in. As the truck pulled away, I looked out the window. The road behind me was turning red with the sunset. I saw my reflection in the glass. A small, frail old man who had just escaped a trap set by the same blood he once swore to love. I didn't know where we were going. I just knew that I had fled from the hands of the son I had trusted more than myself. When Arthur's truck stopped, I was still staring at the dusty road in the distance. He got out of the truck with a steady gait, the bearing of a man who was once a cop. His voice was deep, but warm. "Mr. Miller? I'm Arthur, Ryan's friend. Your son is very worried. He asked me to come get you right away." Hearing Ryan's name, my throat closed up. I nodded and tried to smile, though my lips were trembling. Arthur opened the door and helped me in with a gentleness that moved me. During the ride, I remained silent, listening only to the roll of the tires and the wind hitting the windows. After everything that had happened, I no longer knew who I could trust. Inside me, there was just a big emptiness, as if the air had been stolen from my entire life. After more than an hour, we arrived at a neighborhood on the outskirts of Phoenix. Night had already fallen, and the streetlights cast a yellow glow on the damp pavement. In front of a small house, the door was open. Ryan was waiting for us there, his shirt wrinkled and his eyes red. When I got out of the truck, he ran to me and hugged me tightly, as if afraid I would disappear. "Dad, forgive me. I was too late." I put my hand on his shoulder, feeling his body shake. "It's not your fault, son. The only thing that matters is that I can still see you." We stayed like that, in silence, while the crickets chirped in the yard. I looked at Ryan, his honest, kind eyes, and I felt a calm I hadn't known in a long time. Even though one of my sons had betrayed me, I still had the other one, the one who was fighting not to let me fall. Arthur came in carrying my duffel bag. Inside the house, it smelled like freshly brewed coffee and donuts. Karen, Ryan's wife, approached me with a warm mug. "We were so worried about you, Mr. Miller. Stay here. You don't have to worry about anything." I sat on the couch, my hands still shaking. Ryan brought a blanket and knelt in front of me. "Dad, I need you to tell me everything. From the time Thomas came to get you until the moment you managed to escape. I need to know everything so I can help you." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. Every time I said Thomas's name, I felt my heart clench. I told him every detail: the invitation for the supposed trip, the reservation document, the employee at the care center, the bathroom where I hid, the sound of the engine driving away. When I finished, Ryan's fists were clenched, his jaw tight. "I swear I'm not going to let him get away with this. What he did to his own father, that's not a mistake. It's a crime." I put my hand on his shoulder. "Don't be hasty, son. Anger doesn't bring back dignity. We have to act with justice, not with rage." Ryan looked at me with watery eyes. "You're still thinking about him, Dad, after everything?" I nodded slowly. "Because, even though it hurts, he's still my son. But if he chose that path, then I have to choose mine too. The path to defend my name." Silence filled the room. Ryan sat next to me and took my hand, holding it tightly. The yellow light from the lamp lit up the scene and reminded me of those nights when I used to tell him stories before bed. Now he was the one taking care of me, just as I had done for him. In that instant, I understood that even if the world turns its back on you, there is always one love that doesn't betray you, the love of a child who still knows how to bend down and say, "Dad." And inside me, the flame that had almost gone out flickered back to life. It wasn't the fire of resentment, but that of a father determined not to be buried in the silence of betrayal. That night I slept in the small room at the back of Ryan's house. It was a simple but cozy room, with an old wooden bed, a thick blanket, and the smell of coffee soaked into the walls. Outside, the chirping of insects lulled me to sleep. It had been a long time since I had slept under a roof where you could still hear human voices, not in the heavy silence of loneliness. At dawn, a ray of light filtered through the curtains and fell on my hands. The calluses were still there, witnesses to a lifetime of work in the fields. I sat up and looked around. On the table there was a family photo of Ryan, Karen, and the kids. Everyone was smiling, their eyes full of love. Seeing that picture warmed my chest, and at the same time, made my throat burn with a knot of sadness. Ryan came in with a steaming mug of coffee in his hand. "You're awake, Dad?" I made it how Mom used to, strong and a little bitter. I took the mug and smiled. "The bitter is what wakes you up, son. Thanks. He sat next to me, silent for a few seconds before murmuring, I couldn't sleep all night. I still don't understand how he could do that to you. How could my own brother betray you like that? I breathed out slowly, watching the steam rise from the coffee. When you let greed mark your path, everything else becomes blurry. Your brother doesn't see me as his father anymore, just as a man in a bank account. Ryan clenched his fists and looked down. Don't say that, Dad. It hurts to hear. I put a hand on his shoulder. Pain isn't bad, son. It means you still have a heart. And as long as the heart hurts, we're still alive. Karen called out from the kitchen with a soft voice. Breakfast is ready, Dad. Come and eat before it gets cold. The kids want to say hello before they go to school. I went to the dining room. The little ones ran up, hugged my legs, and gave me a kiss on the cheek. Julia, the oldest, handed me a paper full of colors. A house, a big tree in the yard, and underneath, in crooked letters, it read, Grandpa Thomas's house. I smiled as tears blurred my vision. It's beautiful, Julia. Grandpa, Dad says this is the safest house. No one is going to hurt you ever again. I pressed the drawing to my chest. The safest house. Ryan had told his children that as if it were a promise. I sat at the table, and seeing 3 generations gathered, I understood that there was still something good left in my life, a purpose that survived among the ruins. After breakfast, Ryan pulled a folder from the cabinet. I spoke with a friend who reviewed the documents Thomas used. He says there are signs of forgery. I'm going to contact a lawyer, not just to protect what's yours, Dad, but to prove that he crossed a line. I remained silent. Every time I heard Thomas's name, my chest tightened. I didn't want to see my son as a criminal, but the truth was there, naked, impossible to deny. I don't want revenge, I said calmly. I just want to get my name back, not for the house or the money, but for the promise I made to your mother. She used to say, don't let anyone take your name, not even someone who shares it. Ryan nodded, a quiet firmness in his eyes. I understand, Dad. This time, we'll do things right, without anger, with the truth. I looked at him, and pride filled my chest. I had lost one son, but I still had the other. One who knew what honor and love meant. And in that instant, under the warm light coming through the window, I knew I had found my true refuge, not within 4 walls, but in the arms of those who still remembered who I was. That afternoon, Ryan took me to see a man he called Mr. Vargas. His office was on the 2nd floor of an old building, with shelves full of binders and the smell of paper mixed with coffee floating in the air. He was a middle-aged, calm man with a sharp gaze and a measured voice. As he shook my hand, he looked me straight in the eye and said firmly, Mr. Miller, your son has already told me everything. Today we're going to see exactly what was done to you. I sat down, feeling a mix of shame and anxiety. My whole life had revolved around the farm and the land. I never imagined that one day my name would end up tangled in fraud, much less with my own son as the one responsible. Mr. Vargas opened the folder Ryan had brought and took out a copy of the supposed guardianship power that Thomas had used. He spread it on the desk and pointed to the signature. Do you see anything different here? I leaned over the paper. My signature was at the bottom of the page, or rather that clumsy imitation of it. The lines uneven, without the pressure on the letter M that always marked my signature. I felt a knot in my stomach. It's not my handwriting, I barely said. I never signed anything like that. Mr. Vargas nodded calmly, as if he had expected it. I suspected as much. The ink is from a different type of pen, and the date coincides with the supposed rest period listed in Phoenix. They had it all planned. I sat frozen, cold. Ryan, standing next to me, clenched his fists with contained rage. I told you, Dad. I can't believe my brother went this far. Mr. Vargas raised a hand, calling for calm. Let's not let anger cloud what's important. In these cases, what matters is the evidence. We'll send the signature for a forensic analysis, and I'll ask the court for a protective order to freeze your assets from any movement." Then he looked at me seriously. "The most important thing, Mr. Miller, is that you prove you are fully competent. We are going to document it with medical reports, statements, and witnesses. If the judge certifies it, everything they did will be nullified." I nodded slowly, but inside me, a wound was opening that hurt more than any loss. I never thought the day would come when I'd have to prove I was still in my right mind, just to continue being a person with a name and rights. I murmured, almost voiceless. My whole life I signed with that signature, to buy seed, sell corn, and pay for my son's school. And now that same fake signature is being used to bury me alive. Ryan put his hand on my shoulder, his voice breaking. "Dad, no one can bury someone who is still standing." Mr. Vargas looked at both of us. There was respect in his eyes. "Mr. Miller, believe me, I've seen many cases like this, but few fathers speak of their son with as much calm as you." I replied in a thread of a voice. "I don't want to hate him. I just want him to understand that the father he tried to erase still exists." The office fell silent. Outside, the sunset was staining the windows red. Mr. Vargas collected the documents and concluded, "I'll handle the legal process. You rest, but don't stay silent. Write everything down, every detail. Your voice will be our best proof." On the way home, Ryan drove while I looked out the window. The city was filling with lights and people rushing by. I thought about all the nights I spent working the land, believing that effort and love were enough to harvest gratitude. But I understood something bitter. Sometimes a father's kindness is so great that his children mistake that silence for weakness. I said in a low voice, "Ryan, tomorrow, take me to buy a notebook. I want to write it all down, line by line, memory by memory. No one, not even a son, will ever change the story of my life again." Ryan nodded, his eyes shining with emotion. "I promise you, Dad. This time no one will erase your name again." 3 days after the meeting with the lawyer, a light fog covered the morning. I was sitting on the porch, writing the first lines in my new notebook, when Ryan came out with a tense expression. "Dad, there's someone here to see you," he said in a low voice. "It's Marina, Thomas's girlfriend." My pen stopped mid-page. The name shot through my chest. I had never met her. I had only heard about her from my son, always with pride. "She's smart, strong. She understands me," he would say. And now, that same woman was at my door. Ryan motioned. A young woman of about 30 walked into the yard. She was thin with a sad look in her eyes. She was holding a thick envelope in her hand and walked slowly before speaking. "Forgive me, Mr. Miller. I know coming here isn't right, but I can't stay silent any longer." Her voice was shaking, but it sounded firm. I offered her a seat. Ryan brought coffee, and the silence became as thick as the air before a storm. Marina opened the envelope and took out a USB drive, several printed papers, and some photos of text messages on a screen. "This is what I found," she said. "He, Thomas, planned everything for months. The documents, the payments, even the initial deposit for the home. I didn't know anything until I accidentally saw an email of his." I listened without interrupting, feeling every word like a stone falling on my chest. Ryan, sitting across from me, had eyes red with contained rage. Marina continued. "I confronted him. I asked him why he would do something like that to his own father. He just told me. He doesn't need the money or the freedom. At least there, he'll be managed. But then I found this." She took out her phone and pressed play. Thomas's voice filled the air. Cold, calculating, completely alien to the boy I had taught to plow the land. "It's all set. By the time he wakes up, he'll already be admitted. An old man with money saved up is useless if you don't take advantage of it." My lips trembled. That sentence cut my soul. An old man with money saved up. He spoke of me as if I were an object, a resource. I closed my eyes, and in my mind, Lucy's voice echoed. Not all children grow along with their conscience. Ryan stood up abruptly, hitting the table. I'm taking this recording to Mr. Vargas right now. Ryan! I stopped him. My voice was hoarse. Don't do anything while you're still angry. How can you still defend him, Dad? He asked, his eyes wet. I answered slowly, each word weighing like lead. I'm not defending him. I just don't want to hate. Hate turns you into the same thing he is. I want justice, not revenge. Marina looked down, holding the mug with both hands. Mr. Miller, I know nothing can repair this. But at least you have Ryan, your family. I just wanted to ask for forgiveness for staying silent for so long. I looked at her. In her eyes there was sincere regret. Thank you, Marina. Sometimes telling the truth is also a way of saving a life. You just saved mine, for the second time. Silence filled the room. Outside, the fog was lifting, and the first rays of sun were breaking through the leaves. I picked up the notebook and wrote one more line. A person doesn't die from betrayal, but when they stop believing that someone will dare to tell the truth. I looked up. In front of me were Marina and Ryan, two different faces but united by something I thought was lost. The courage to face the truth. And I understood then that my fight to get my dignity back was just beginning. That night I couldn't sleep. The first rain of the season was falling softly in the yard, and the smell of wet earth crept into the whole house. Ryan and Karen were already asleep, but I was still at the kitchen table, with a new notebook in front of me and the pen Ryan had bought me the day before. The first page was still blank, except for one sentence I had written that morning. No one has the right to sign the story of your life for you. I started to write, line by line, everything that had happened since the moment Thomas knocked on my door, his fake smile, the reservation paper, and the empty voice on the recording Marina had brought. With every word, my hand trembled a little more. Sometimes I had to stop because the tears blurred the ink. Between the sound of the rain, I heard Lucy's voice, as soft as the wind from other times. Don't let the pain turn you into another man, Thomas. Write it all down, because the truth is the only thing that will keep you standing. I looked up at her portrait on the wall. Her eyes, sweet and firm at the same time, were still watching me, as always. I remembered the days when we worked the land together, the afternoons when she would dry the corn in the sun, and she would tell me, laughing, the earth never betrays the one who takes care of it. That sentence echoed in my mind, and I couldn't help but wonder, if the earth doesn't betray, why do people betray their own blood? I kept writing, my handwriting slanted, clumsy with emotion. I, Thomas Miller, am not writing this notebook to complain. I'm doing it to remember that I still have my memory, my reason, and my will. I'm writing it for my grandchildren, so they know that their grandfather did not stay silent while they buried him alive under betrayal. A flash of lightning lit up the window, reflecting in the frame of Lucy's photo. For a second, I could have sworn I saw her smile. I felt my heart grow lighter. Maybe she was there, somewhere, watching me keep the promise I made her, not to let anyone take our dignity. I closed the notebook and put my hand on the still warm cover. The last sentence I wrote that night was, "If tomorrow I no longer remember my name, at least let this notebook remember it for me." The next morning, when Ryan came out of his room, I was making coffee. "What were you writing all night, Dad?" he asked. I smiled and poured him a mug. "I was writing my life, son, so that no one else can write it for me." Ryan looked at me with tenderness and pride. He didn't say anything. He sat next to me, and we watched the steam rise from the mugs, under the soft light of dawn. I knew that from that moment on, my fight was no longer about escaping, but about standing tall with my own words and my own memory. And between the warmth of the coffee and the clarity of the new day, I heard Lucy's voice rise from the bottom of my heart. Very good, Thomas. You've begun to get your voice back. The following days passed in a quiet whirlwind. Ryan went back and forth between the house and Mr. Vargas's office, almost every day. I stayed behind, taking care of the potted plants in the yard. Every time I watered them, I thought of Lucy. She used to say, "Plants only live if they're watered by a hand that knows how to love." I understood then that people aren't any different. Without affection, the soul dries up like abandoned earth. One morning the phone rang. It was Vargas. His voice sounded calm but firm. "Mr. Miller, the court has rejected your son's petition. They did not accept the request for guardianship. And furthermore, they have opened an investigation for forgery of documents and fraud." I stood there in silence, holding the receiver tightly. It took me several seconds to react. "Does that mean we won?" "Not exactly," Vargas replied. "But justice is on our side. It's time to come into the light." Ryan, when he found out, ran to hug me. "I told you, Dad. No one can erase someone who is still aware of himself." I nodded. The word victory didn't mean anything to me. What I felt wasn't joy, but a strange mixture of relief and sadness. That afternoon, we went to Vargas's office to sign some documents. He handed me a thick folder. "Here it is. From now on, any movement of your assets or your rights will require your original signature. No one can represent you without your consent." I looked at my name printed on the first page, Mr. Thomas Miller, and an emotion tightened my throat. How long had it been since I last saw my name on a piece of paper without fear? That simple name had become the shield between me and oblivion. Ryan shook Vargas's hand with gratitude. I watched them and said slowly, "I don't want to see my son behind bars. I just want him to understand what it means to erase your own father from life." Vargas nodded with a serene tone. "Sometimes, the hardest lesson isn't learned in prison, but when the truth is exposed for all to see." On the way back, Ryan drove in silence. I looked out the window. The wind moved the dry fields, and the sunset light painted them gold. For the first time in months, I felt my heart was lighter. I may be old, I thought, but I still have the right to choose how to live. And I've decided not to give up. At a crossroads, Ryan glanced at me. "And now, Dad, what do we do?" I smiled faintly. "We wait, son. But while we wait, I'll keep writing, because you only disappear when you fall silent. And I don't plan on being silent." That night I opened my notebook and added a new page. Justice doesn't always arrive with the bang of a gavel, but with the quiet sigh of someone who was unjustly accused and manages to sleep in peace. I'm not looking for revenge, only to get back the humanity in my own son. Even if he has lost it, I will keep holding on to it. I put down the pen and lit a candle in front of Lucy's portrait. The flame flickered, illuminating her smile. Then I murmured, my voice choked but firm, "My love, I got my name back, and I will never let anyone take it from me again." The day of the first hearing dawned gray, as if the sky shared the weight I was carrying inside. Ryan drove me there early. The traffic to the Phoenix courthouse was a sea of impatient cars. I was wearing the light blue shirt that Lucy had given me for my birthday many years ago. She used to say, "Blue makes you look more steadfast." I wanted to look steadfast, even if inside I was just shaking. The courtroom wasn't large, but it was full of unfamiliar faces. As I walked in, I saw him. Thomas was already there, in his perfectly pressed suit, his shoes shining, and that air of cold confidence I never knew him to have. Next to him, his lawyer, a young man with a sharp gaze, was reviewing some documents. Thomas didn't look at me. I don't know if it was fear or contempt. I just know my heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. The judge entered and banged the gavel. The session began. Thomas's lawyer stood up, his voice clear and confident. "Your Honor, we request a new evaluation of the mental capacity of Mr. Thomas Miller. According to reports, he is showing signs of cognitive decline. and severe confusion. We believe he is no longer in a condition to manage his own estate. Every word pierced me like a needle. I looked up, waiting for my son to deny it, to at least look at me, to show a shred of remorse. But no, he remained motionless, his hands clasped, his gaze empty. Then Mr. Vargas stood up, calm but firm. "Your Honor, have recent medical certificates proving that Mr. Miller is in full possession of his faculties. Furthermore, we will present witnesses, Father Michael, neighbors, and acquaintances, all willing to testify that Mr. Miller lives alone, manages his own affairs, and maintains a lucid memory." The judge nodded, asking for the documents to be presented. Vargas opened his folder and handed over the papers one by one. Silence filled the room. You could only hear the rustling of paper and the distant typing of the court clerk. Then the judge looked at me. "Mr. Miller, do you wish to say anything?" I stood up. My legs were shaking, but my voice came out clear. "Your Honor, I am 78 years old. Yes, I forget small things. That's also true. But there is something I don't forget. Who I am. I remember the seeds I planted, the harvest I raised, the day my son was born, and I remember very well that he is the one trying to erase me from his life. I'm not asking for money or privileges. I'm just asking to be allowed to continue being myself." The silence was total. I could hear my own heart and the soft tapping of the judge's pen on the desk. I turned to Thomas, and looking him straight in the eye, I added, "Thomas, I'm still here. You can forge my signature, but you can't forge the memory of the man who raised you." For an instant, just a second, I saw something break in his gaze, a tiny crack in the mask of ice. The hearing concluded. Ryan grabbed my hand tightly. "Dad, you did amazing." I smiled, exhausted. Outside, the sun was breaking through the clouds, filling the air with golden light. I knew this was just the beginning of the real battle, not a fight to prove my sanity, but to preserve a father's dignity. 2 weeks after the hearing, I barely left the house. My body was weaker. The sleepless nights stretched on, but my mind had never been clearer. Every morning I sat on the porch and wrote, slowly filling the pages of the notebook. Ryan asked me to rest, but I would answer him, "When you're in the middle of a storm, resting is just letting the wind take you. I have to write, so the wind knows I'm still here." One afternoon, as the sun was beginning to set, there was a knock on the door. Ryan went to open it, and I heard a female voice, trembling but familiar. "I'm sorry, I'm Marina. Can I see Mr. Miller?" I came out into the hallway and saw her. She was thin, pale, with dark circles under her eyes like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. She was holding an envelope, but in her eyes there wasn't just fear anymore. There was something softer, more vulnerable. "Mr. Miller," she said slowly, "I need to tell you something. I left Thomas. I couldn't keep living next to someone I don't even recognize." She paused, took a deep breath, and added, her voice breaking, "I'm pregnant." The air stood still. Ryan froze. I, too, was silent. The wind blew through the trees in the yard, moving the leaves with a sound that seemed like an ancient sigh. Marina lowered her head and murmured, "I'm not here to ask for anything. I just want the child to grow up knowing the truth, to know who his grandfather really was." I approached her slowly. Her young face showed fear, yes, but also a spark of courage. "Daughter," I said softly, "that child is not to blame. If one day he asks you, tell him that his grandfather forgave his father, but that he didn't forget because forgetting is weakness and forgiving is strength." Marina broke down crying. The tears ran uncontrollably down her cheeks. I hugged her carefully, feeling the tremor of her breath. "I'm afraid my son will grow up to hate his father," she whispered. "Maybe," I replied, "but with time, he'll understand. What you hate isn't the people, but the darkness that blinds them." Ryan came over and put a hand on Marina's shoulder. "You're not alone. If you need help, we'll be here." She looked at us, her eyes full of tears but also of light, and she smiled for the first time since she arrived. "Thank you, Mr. Miller. Thank you for not holding a grudge." I shook my head. Grudges shrink the soul, and today I want to make mine a little bigger, to make room for that child. When Marina left, the sunset was bathing the yard in a honey-colored light. I watched her walk away, and I felt a new peace inside me. In the midst of so many losses, life had sown a seed again, small, fragile, but enough to remind me that not everything dies after betrayal. The news of the lawsuit spread faster than I imagined. In a few days, the local papers were running headlines in large letters. Son accused of forging father's signature to seize assets. Old neighbors from Nebraska called, some curious, others genuinely concerned. Ryan asked me not to read the papers, but I told him, "You have to look at the wound so it doesn't get infected. Ignoring it only lets it rot in silence." One morning we went out for coffee near the house. As we walked into the diner, I heard two men muttering at the next table. "That's him, the old man his own son tried to cheat." I pretended not to hear them. The waiter brought our mugs, and as he set mine on the table, he said in a low voice, "Mr. Miller, I saw the news. What a disgrace. But everyone here knows you're a good man. The whole neighborhood is on your side." I smiled and replied calmly, "Thank you, son. People can doubt a lot of things, but you can't doubt what's good for long." Ryan looked at me with a mix of pride and sadness. I knew it wasn't just his brother's betrayal that hurt him, but also the whispers, the stares, the exposure. But inside me, there was a strange peace, maybe because I had already survived the greatest pain, accepting that my own son was capable of hurting me. That afternoon, Mr. Vargas arrived with new documents. He left them on the table and explained, "The court accepted new evidence from Marina. The payments Thomas made to the nursing home are listed in your name, Mr. Miller. But the money came from a savings account you opened in 1998. In other words, he used your own money to finance your imprisonment." I felt a pang in my chest, though no longer surprise. Ryan hit the table with contained rage. "That man is not my brother anymore, Dad." I just murmured, "Don't say that, son. People don't disappear. They just lose their part of the light." Mr. Vargas watched me and smiled sadly. "Mr. Miller, you are still far too compassionate." "It's not compassion," I replied. "It's that I don't want to lose the little good that's left in me." Days later, something changed in the neighborhood. When I went to the market, people greeted me with respect. An old woman selling flowers gave me a bouquet of white chrysanthemums. "Don't be sad, Mr. Miller," she said. "The whole town knows who is right." I smiled, grateful. A new calm filled my chest, not because I felt vindicated, but because I understood that the truth doesn't need to shout to be heard. It just needs to keep standing. That night I wrote in my notebook, "When you are betrayed, you lose faith in others. But when the truth comes to light, you get back the faith in yourself." I closed the notebook and looked at Lucy's portrait in the warm light of the lamp. Her smile seemed alive. I knew then that she would be smiling too. And I finally understood that justice doesn't need noise. It just needs to be seen, as clear as the smile of someone who is gone, but never left. The following days, Ryan's house slowly returned to its quiet rhythm. I would get up early, make coffee, and sit on the porch to watch the sun rise behind the neighbor's roof. The laughter of my grandchildren filled the yard. Every morning, Julia would run to me with a new paper, a drawing of Grandpa writing in his notebook, or a house with a garden full of flowers, and underneath, in crooked letters that said, "Grandpa never falls." Grandpa never gives up. I would look at the drawings and feel my chest warm. Those childish lines squeezed my heart with a mixture of pain and joy. That little girl, didn't understand what betrayal was, nor did she know what justice meant. But in her little heart, I was still someone to trust, and maybe that alone was enough to keep going. At noon, Ryan sat with me on the porch and told me the latest news from Vargas. The court is finishing the process to protect you legally. From now on, no one can touch your assets or your name. I nodded in silence. What I most wanted to protect wasn't in those papers, but in the memory of those I loved. I asked in a low voice, "And Marina? Is she okay?" Ryan smiled tenderly. "She went for her checkup. She says the baby is healthy, and that if it's a girl, she'll name her Hope." I was speechless. Hope. Of course, the perfect name for someone who wants to start over. In the afternoon, I went out to the garden to water the plants. The sunset light fell gently on the new shoots. There was a tree that Lucy and I had planted almost 40 years ago. Its trunk was rough, and its roots were sunk deep into the earth. I put my hand on it, and I felt the warmth of life rise through my skin. Trees are like people, Thomas. Don't be afraid of the wind. When it blows, the roots just hold on tighter. I heard that phrase from Lucy echo in my memory, sweet and firm at the same time. When the sun went down, I went back to my table and wrote a new page in the notebook. I thought I had lost everything, but the loss was just the earth being turned over, so the seed could see the light. I put down the pen and smiled. Through the window, I could see Julia laughing with her brother, Ryan and Karen talking in the kitchen, while the aroma of cornbread filled the house. Life went on, simple and brave. I looked up at Lucy's photo and murmured, "See, my love, I'm still here, like our old tree. The wind blows, the storms come, but the roots are still firm and the flowers are still blooming." One morning at the beginning of the month, while I was watering the plants in the yard, Ryan came out with an old envelope, yellowed with time. "The mailman said this is for you, Dad. It's from Nebraska." I opened it a bit and saw Aunt Helen's name, Mom's sister. I dried my hands and took the envelope. In the top corner, I immediately recognized the round, familiar handwriting. My heart skipped a beat. It wasn't Helen's handwriting. It was Lucy's. My hands were shaking as I broke the seal. Inside was a sheet of paper, folded in two, yellowed, with a soft scent of lavender, the same thing she used to scent the clothes. The written lines were firm and delicate, like her. "My dearest Thomas, if you are reading this letter, it's because I might not be by your side anymore. I just want to remind you of one thing. A person's honor isn't in what they own, but in how they live and forgive. If one day our children are not what you hoped, don't let the disappointment turn you bitter. Hold on to your name, because it's not just yours, it's also our family's. Lucy." I stood still, unable to let go of the paper. My eyes were burning, the letters blurring with tears. Ryan was by my side, silent. I took a deep breath, a sigh that hurt and liberated at the same time. "You see, son? Your mother understood everything before it happened." Ryan nodded, his voice trembling. "Maybe she knew Thomas would get lost, but she also knew that you wouldn't fall." I smiled weakly, folded the letter, and put it over my chest. I felt something warm, like an invisible caress that told me, "You did well." That afternoon I took the letter to the garden and placed it under the tree that Lucy and I had planted together. I didn't bury it deep, just covered the page with a thin layer of earth. "I'm leaving you here, my love," I murmured, "so you can hear the smell of the earth, the sun, and the harvests, like before." As I put the last handful of dirt, I felt a hole inside me fill up. That letter had arrived at the exact right in time, when I needed to remember that kindness never goes out of style, and that some loves are stronger than betrayal. That night I wrote in my notebook, "You were right, Lucy. Forgiving isn't forgetting. It's opening the door of your heart to let the light in. I will not allow the shadow of another to stain my name." The candle burned small, its reflection dancing on the old photo. And I knew then that even though she was gone, Lucy was still the fairest judge of the rest of my life. That afternoon I was sitting on the porch, writing, when I heard loud knocks on the door. Ryan went to open it. A hoarse, trembling voice resonated from the other side. "I'm Thomas. Is my father home?" I looked up. My heart immediately clenched. After so many months, his voice still chilled me to the bone. I put down the pen and went out. In front of me, there was a broken man, scruffy beard, wrinkled shirt, eyes sunk from insomnia. Thomas, the son I was once so proud of, was there, lost, shaking. Ryan clenched his fists, his voice loaded with anger. "What are you doing here? Dad doesn't want to see you." "Ryan, let him talk," I said in a low voice. Thomas took a few steps inside, not daring to look at me. "Dad, I just came to ask for forgiveness. I know everything got out of control. I lost everything. My job, respect, even Marina." I looked at him, and the image of the boy who ran through the rows of the field, yelling, "Dad!" while I brought in the harvest, crossed my mind. But that boy didn't exist anymore. The man in front of me was someone who had let his own light die. "And now, what do you want from me?" I asked slowly. "Nothing. Just for you to forgive me." The silence became heavy. The clock inside the house marked the seconds coldly. Then I spoke, my voice dry, firm, like the earth when it hasn't rained. "You know, Thomas, forgiving is the easiest thing in the world, but it's useless if the one asking doesn't understand what they did. You didn't betray my money. You betrayed your mother's memory, and you betrayed yourself." He lowered his head. His shoulders were shaking. "I know, Dad. I just want to start over." I searched his eyes for a reflection of that spark he had when he believed in honest work, in dignity. But I only found emptiness. Then I said each word with the weight of a falling stone. "The son I knew is gone. He died the day you signed that forgery. From today on, I have nothing to forgive or to hate. Between you and me, there is only silence, and that silence says it all." Thomas stood motionless. Tears were running down his face, but he didn't take a step toward me. Ryan stepped forward, his voice hard. "Leave. Dad doesn't need any more wounds." Thomas turned around and walked out slowly. I heard the door slam and then the sound of the engine fading into the distance. I remained standing, still, feeling only an empty sadness, without resentment. "Son," I said to Ryan calmly, "sometimes forgiving doesn't mean opening the door, but just stopping to hold on to the key." Ryan hugged me tightly. Outside, the afternoon sun came through the window, lighting up the open notebook on the table. I wrote one last line. "The one who betrayed me is already gone. What's left is me, learning to stand tall within the silence." The days after that meeting, the house returned to its normal rhythm. But inside me, a door closed softly. It wasn't the door of resentment, but the one of useless hopes. I knew I would never again wish for Thomas to be the way he was before. And strangely, in accepting that, my heart felt lighter than ever. In the mornings, I still made coffee, and I set out 2 mugs, like always. One for me, one for Lucy. I would talk to her as if she were still sitting next to me. "It's all over, my love. I didn't win. I didn't lose. I just stayed still, and I let the wind take what no longer belonged to me." Ryan left early for work. Karen moved among the aromas of the kitchen, and Julia ran to me with another drawing in her hands. This time it was a big tree, with deep roots and little yellow lights around it. "This is you, Grandpa," she said. "You're the tree, and we are the flowers." I smiled and stroked her head. "Thank you, Julia. I promise not to let my flowers fall." In the afternoon, I went for a walk around the neighborhood. I heard the greetings. I saw people's smiles. No one looked at me with pity anymore. Everyone knew the truth, and I felt grateful. At my age, I don't need praise, just the quiet respect in the eyes of others. That respect I thought I had lost. That night I opened my notebook and wrote, "Forgiving others is easier than forgiving yourself." I blamed myself for raising a son capable of betrayal, but now I understand that love doesn't guarantee gratitude. It only guarantees that, even when betrayed, you still know how to love without turning to stone. I put down the pen, watching the flickering flame of the candle. Outside you could hear the children's laughter, the soft sound of life going on. The scars don't disappear, I thought, but they don't hurt the same way. Maybe this was the real reconciliation, not with Thomas, but with the wounded part inside of me. I smiled. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in many months, I felt peace. That silent justice that life grants to those who resist without ceasing to be themselves. That morning, the sunlight came softly through the window. Ryan had just returned from the courthouse with a sealed envelope in his hand. I saw him approach and I felt a strange, deep calm. He opened the envelope and read slowly, his voice firm. "The court officially declares all of Thomas's accusations dismissed. The forged documents are nullified. Furthermore, our countersuit is accepted. Thomas will be investigated for fraud, abuse, and forgery." I nodded without joy or sadness. Maybe because justice, when it arrives, doesn't sound like thunder. It just opens up a space of peace within the soul. Ryan looked at me, his eyes shining. "Dad, in the end, the truth won." I smiled faintly and replied, "No, son, the truth didn't win. The fact that we didn't give up in the face of the lie won." That afternoon I went back to the old house in Nebraska, where it all began. The rusty gate creaked as I opened it. The smell of earth, wood, and kitchen smoke hit my chest. I sat in the chair that Lucy preferred and opened the notebook, almost full now. I wrote the last line. "You can forge a signature, but not a father's life. You can erase a name from a piece of paper, but not from the memory of those who still know how to love." I closed the notebook and looked at the portrait of Lucy on the table. The sunset light caressed her face, as serene as in our youth. I murmured, "See, my love?" I kept my name, not for the judges, but because I didn't let the pain steal my compassion. The door opened and small footsteps sounded. Julia and her brother ran in with a new drawing. In it, I was standing in the garden, notebook in hand, surrounded by flowers and sun. Above, in crooked letters, it read, "Grandpa is my hero." I hugged them tightly, listening to their laughter, breathing in the smell of the sun, of life, of forgiveness. Ryan and Karen watched us from the door, their eyes full of tenderness. I looked up at the sky. The sun was falling golden on the rooftops, and I understood that I had won, not in a courtroom, but in a much bigger battle, the one to keep my dignity and kindness in a world that easily forgets filial love. I closed my eyes and smiled. I was betrayed, but not erased. I fell, but I got up, and as long as there is someone who calls me Dad, who calls me Grandpa, I will keep living inside the truth. If this story captivated you, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. To hear the next story, click the box on the left of your screen. Thanks for listening.